All right, well, welcome everybody. This is our workshop on Flipgrid for asynchronous video discussion. You can see a link there on our title slide. If you want to access these slides, they're accessible at bit.ly/appstateflipgrid. And we're going to jump right in with some introductions here.
Hi, I'm Jamie Parsons. I'm a faculty in the Finance, Banking, and Insurance Department. I've been at Appalachian for about 8 years, and I teach business law and insurance courses. I've taught in person as well as online, and I've used Flipgrid for the last couple of years.
And my name's Ike Smith. I'm the director of the James Center for Student Success and Advising in the Wright College of Education. I'm also an adjunct instructor in the College of Ed. I teach CI 2300, Teaching and Learning in the Digital Age, and Reading 3070, Media for Young People, and make use of Flipgrid in those courses to, again, facilitate discussion between my students. So we had originally designed these slides for a synchronous workshop, but even if you're viewing this asynchronously, we would encourage you to think about kind of what brings you to this topic, and maybe in what ways are you seeking to enhance student interaction and discussion in your course, and how Flipgrid might help with that. So keep that on the back burner as we kind of go through our slides today.
By the end of this session, we hope that you will understand how to access and use Flipgrid, both as a teacher and as a student, understand how to embed links in Flipgrid into your As You Learn LMS system, and to see and discuss examples of us using Flipgrid to promote student interaction and engagement.
Cool. So we'll dive right in. So we'll start kind of with the basics about how to use Flipgrid, and then we'll get into the fun stuff of the examples of what it actually looks like in our courses. So to kind of get into Flipgrid as an educator, it's really straightforward. You'll visit flipgrid.com. There's an educator sign up button that you'll see, and I'll open up the website here, up here in the upper right corner of the screen. And so you'll click that, and then I'm already logged in, so let me log back out. Flipgrid is great because it integrates with Google, and so at App State, we've all got our App State G Suite logins, and so you can just click that Google login button, choose your App State Gmail account, and that will get you right in to where you can start setting up some grids and some topics, and we'll talk about what the differences between those and how they relate here in a little bit.
So there are two terms that you should be familiar with utilizing Flipgrid. One is a grid and the other is a topic. So with a grid, you would use a grid for laying out each class. So each grid, if you want to go to the next slide. This is an example of a grid. So I house both of my classes on the same grid. So I teach a law class and I also teach an employee benefits class. So I have separate grids for each one of my classes. A topic would be where I would go into one of my classes and I would create specific topics for that class. So the first topic you see is an introduction topic that I use with my class. The second one I use for contracts analysis, and then the third one is some ideas for another assignment that I had. And so for each class, you would have this master grid that you would then create topics for each one of your classes. So what it looks like to share one of your topics with your students is there is a URL that you can pull up. If you see that here on the left side of the screen, you can just copy that and paste that into your As You Learn under the URL adding button. You can also use a QR code if you utilize that. Also, you can utilize this embed code, which Ike used a couple of ways in his class. A couple other features in the sharing topic, there's the QR code that's on the right-hand side, but this other feature is kind of neat. It's an opportunity that you can engage maybe an external or industry partner with interacting with your students in the comments that they make in their discussion board. So say you have a discussion topic, you would toggle this over to topic guest mode, which would allow someone else to enter into that space and add comments. I'm going to show you a couple of ways that he embeds these links into his class, but I utilize a lot of Canva and Pictocharts in my classes. And so this is one way that I invited my students to participate in this Flipgrid. I gave them the assignment, gave them the URL, and then this URL also serves as a hot link on the page for As You Learn. And then I also provided my students with a section on how to use Flipgrid in case they're first-time users.
So on the student side of things, to participate in a Flipgrid, the first thing they'll do is access that Flipgrid through whatever means you as the instructor have shared it with them. So those methods we've talked about previously could be a link, could be a QR code. It might be that you've embedded the Flipgrid directly in your course, and we'll talk about how to do that. There's also a method where every Flipgrid topic has a specific code associated with it, and there's different ways to locate that. If I go over to mine, if I go into a specific grid for my class, and then here's all my topics, like if I visit this topic, as an instructor, the flip code you can see up here at the top of the page, and it's also, if you look at the actual URL for the Flipgrid, the portion after flipgrid.com is the flip code. So that's another way that you could provide that to students. And if they visit flipgrid.com, they just put in that code directly. But through whatever means, sorry, I lost my slide. Through whatever means students use to access the Flipgrid, once they're there, and this is what I love about Flipgrid, all they have to do to participate is just hit the big green button. And that's, I mean, there's a little more nuance to it than that. And Jamie modeled some really good practice with providing students a guide on how to use the tool, not just assuming that they know how. But as a rough and ready overview, that's what I tell my students is hit the big green button and then you're ready to go. And that's probably one of the biggest things I love about Flipgrid. I've seen even kindergarten teachers who have successfully used Flipgrid with their students because it is that simple to operate. So hit the big green button and record, and then once students have recorded Flipgrids, they'll start to populate in that topic. And so once other posts are in a topic, students can then click any of those posts to view it, to hear some of their colleagues' responses, and then depending on, as the instructor, how you've set up your topic, you can enable student replies, and we'll see that in some of our examples later on. I think that's one of the really great parts about Flipgrid. And so students could then click that reply button below someone's video and post their own video response. So much in the same way like a traditional text-based discussion forum would work, Flipgrid has that same kind of flow where I can post my thoughts and then get responses to it. So pretty straightforward. So we've got some examples of how Jamie and I have used Flipgrid in our courses. This first one is from my teaching and learning in the digital age course. And later in the semester, we spent some time talking about mobile apps and teaching with mobile apps. And it can be kind of a daunting topic because it's like, you know, there's new apps being created all the time, and how do we cover all this? So Flipgrid was a way for me to kind of get my arms around this section of the course. And what I did was ask students, I gave them some resources where they could go out, find different apps that were currently being used by teachers, and then I set up a Flipgrid for them to record their reviews of a particular app that they selected. And so we can go look at this live. So basically, they chose an app, they recorded their review about a particular app. And then prior to, and this section of the class is set up in a blended format where we would meet face-to-face one night a week, and then the rest of the content was happening asynchronously online. So they posted these Flipgrid discussions kind of during our asynchronous portion, viewed them, and then during our face-to-face class time, we were able to go into more depth about how they might apply these apps in their classroom practice. So it was a way to kind of prime the pump for that discussion. And then another example that I have is the same course. There's a project in which students have to make a video that they could use to introduce a lesson in their course. And it can be a tricky project for students to wrap their heads around. They may not have thought about using video in their practice before, or they may not have thought about how to introduce a lesson in a way that is engaging and hooks students. So to help them wrap their brains around that, I give them some examples from previous classes. And Flipgrid was a fun way for us to process those examples and share thoughts about them. It also seemed fitting that in a project that's about video, that we use video also to discuss it. And a couple things about this particular example that I like. One is up here in the description, this is a good example of how within Flipgrid you can, as the instructor, link particular resources to a Flipgrid discussion. And so you can see here, I've got YouTube links to the 3 exemplar projects so that it's right there for students to view. I also have this linked in As You Learn as well, but I try to duplicate that so that everything's in one place for students. And then this is also a good example of a grid where students were replying to one another. So you can see, like with Livia's response here, there's her video, and then I can see 3 students who replied to her. And I can click on Livia's to watch her response, or I can click on any of her peers to see how they replied to her. So yeah, and I'll hop back to my previous example just for a second. This is also an example of what it looks like when you embed a Flipgrid in As You Learn. So this screenshot, we're actually inside As You Learn. This is an assignment page that I created. And you can see I've left a placeholder for the Flipgrid, and then in the HTML portion of the editor in As You Learn, you can go in and paste the embed code that you copied from Flipgrid, and then your grid will show up right there in As You Learn. A kind of pro tip, I guess, that I like to share with folks if you want to go the embedding route is when you're editing your page or your assignment, leave yourself some placeholder text where you want to embed your Flipgrid. And I usually just put, like, in all caps, embed here. And then when you switch to the HTML view of the editor, it's easy to find where you want your Flipgrid to go. And then you can just delete out that placeholder text and paste in the code that you get from Flipgrid. And then it's right there, easy to manage. Students don't get lost trying to figure out where to go. So yeah, a couple examples there. And Jamie, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. So I do this activity in my in-person class as well as on my online class. And I used to do it just in my in-person class, where I would have students bring a copy of a contract that they were a party to, trying to give some real life application to the content that we were covering in class. And what I found was that not everybody was participating in it. So another pro to Flipgrid is that you're really getting a lot of your students to participate on an individual level. So what I have them do is I have them find a contract that they're a party to. Usually most college students have some sort of lease agreement or something along those lines. And when we're talking about business law, we're usually talking about corporations and business structures, and a lot of them aren't at that space yet where they're dealing with contracts with businesses. So this kind of takes it to a level that they can relate to. And I have them post a 30-second to 1-minute video discussing something that they found interesting about the contract or something that they didn't realize that they had agreed to. And we use this activity at the beginning of the unit as kind of an intro activity to get them acclimated to what a contract might look like, maybe some reasons that we can go back to later on as we're covering the material to say, Lizzie, remember when you talked about X? Well, that's actually called this in contract law.
So this was going to be a space in our in-person synchronous workshop where we would encourage some discussion about your ideas, your examples, maybe if you've already used Flipgrid or just thinking about how you might. So we would encourage you, if you're viewing our recording, to take a moment here to reflect and think about, again, how you might be able to use this tool to encourage discussion with your students asynchronously, and how that might blend into a synchronous portion of your class. Jamie and I have both talked about how these asynchronous conversations can support students and scaffold them into synchronous conversations. One other thought I was going to throw in here too is that there's times where I will use Flipgrid as the only option for an asynchronous discussion. There's also times where I will, in order to give students some choice in their modality, I like to pair Flipgrid with the traditional discussion forum in As You Learn, so that if students are more comfortable expressing themselves in writing, they have that option. If they prefer to express themselves verbally, they're stronger in that way. To have Flipgrid as an option to do that. So just another strategy there to give students some choice. So think about what that might mean for you in your coursework. We've got some additional resources here to help you. We realize this has been kind of a quick introduction to Flipgrid. And I do think that's fitting, because again, I want to emphasize Flipgrid is a really easy tool to get into and play with, and we would encourage you to just sign in and start experimenting with it. But if you do want some more guidance to help you in that process, Flipgrid as a company has some really good support documentation. They have specifically a guide they created recently, I think as part of the coronavirus response, about using Flipgrid in higher education. They also have a really detailed help center with some great getting started guides, both for educators and for students. And then institutionally at App State, we have some really good resources as well from the Center for Academic Excellence. Mary Beth McKee is a Flipgrid expert and has created some really nice tutorials, as well as a sample Flipgrid. So if you want to see what it's like to use one as a student, you can click through to that sample and post your video there and try it out.
And I would just say, back to that last resource slide, if you do decide to utilize Flipgrid in your class, I would strongly encourage utilizing Mary Beth's videos and putting those on your As You Learn, so that students have a really quick understanding of how to use Flipgrid. It makes the process so much easier for them trying the tool for the first time. Mm-hmm. And then I did a quick search of some of the scholarly articles out there about Flipgrid and really what some other faculty are doing using Flipgrid. This first link will take you to a really short article that talks about some kind of pros and cons to utilizing Flipgrid and how it enhances social learning. One, it provides access to students. If you think about if you utilize a Facebook page or an Instagram page, how students who don't use Facebook or Instagram might be disadvantaged in engaging in those conversations. This provides that access to students. It also enables some participation from students that you might not otherwise hear about in your class. Some of the weaknesses really is that competitiveness piece, where kind of fits that whole highlight reel of social media, that students may want to look a certain way or present themselves a certain way and get really frustrated in that process. So I think just being really mindful of that. And then it also talks about students really wanting to say the right thing and not to be wrong in such a public forum where everybody can see it. But I think for us in the business school, so many of our students are then asked in their professions for their opinion. So it's a really nice way for them to practice those speaking skills that they may not otherwise get. If you go back, the other articles, the second one talks about, I think the author was using it in nursing practicum. Then in lieu of handwritten journals, they were utilizing these Flipgrid minute long videos to have their students write their reflections as they were doing their practicum experiences. So this might be a nice quick way to engage students if you are someone that utilizes that journal experience in a less time consuming manner for students, and one that can receive a little bit more reflection from a verbal perspective. And then the third article is actually kind of cool. It was the author was utilizing Flipgrid in language classes, which I think back to the days when I took Spanish, how the importance of not just reading Spanish, but having those experiences to have conversation, but then also listening back on other people having those making those statements or those videos as well. And the author talks about how important Flipgrid or valuable tool Flipgrid turned out to be in that language class.
So wide applicability of Flipgrid regardless of your content area, for sure. if you get into Flipgrid and you're loving it and you want to try some different stuff and really kind of spread your wings and experiment further, some other aspects you might try. Flipgrid does have some functionality built in for assessment as an instructor. I will say one drawback is that assessment on the Flipgrid side does not sync over to As You Learn Gradebook. So personally, in my experience, when I've used Flipgrid, first of all, I've used it in settings where I'm pretty much just grading for completion, because the goal is to get students to explore a topic and discuss, and so I'm not as concerned about grading for accuracy. I don't know, Jamie, if that's similar with your experience.
Yeah, similar. I use low points, low stakes for utilizing Flipgrid, just for the experience and less for being detailed in the rubric.
Mm-hmm. I'm a former high school English teacher by trade, so I see Flipgrid kind of analogous to the daily bell ringer journal entries that I used to do with students, low stakes, practice kind of thing. But there is that rubric option built into Flipgrid to give feedback, so you can click through to that link and see some guides about how to set that up. There are also some other kind of advanced features. Flipgrid mixtapes is a feature where individuals can curate different videos from different Flipgrids and build this collection of video responses, maybe on a particular topic. That could be maybe an interesting way for students to like build a portfolio if you were to use Flipgrid really heavily throughout your course, things like that. There is I guess a system, you would say, set up called #GridPals. And from the reading I've done on this, this is an instructor who was really passionate about using Flipgrid and wanted to develop a way to use Flipgrid kind of as a digital video pen pal type of system. And so she worked with the company and they built this thing called GridPals. So you can kind of geographically see where different users are at and build these pen pal experiences. And then Flipgrid Shorts is kind of neat because it uses the Flipgrid technology, the actual video recording piece, and allows you to record, again, similarly short videos, but rather than them being stuck within the Flipgrid platform, you can then post them anywhere. So to YouTube or email or whatever. So some resources there for you to try as you continue to get comfortable with Flipgrid and want to kind of take it to the next level. So if you have any questions, obviously we can't answer them right now because we're not live people with you right now, but we would love to stay in touch with you as you're implementing this in your coursework. So feel free to email either of us with thoughts, ideas, questions. We'd love to continue to discuss. Also, again, Center for Academic Excellence is a fantastic resource. Reach out to your consultant in your college. Reach out in particular to Mary Beth McKee, who has created those resources we shared earlier and is a Flipgrid pro. But yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. And again, would just love to hear kind of how you're thinking about this and what you might want to try. So Jamie, any final thoughts?
No, enjoy.
Yeah, thank you all for coming and stay in touch.